Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my Winter 2026 quarterly writing wrap-up video. I make these quarterly wrap-up videos every 3 months in order to set goals for myself, see if I met them or if a certain SEPTA has to come visit me, and then set new goals for the next 3 months. I'm hoping that, this sort of schedule can leave things a little more manageable, although, the SEPTA is still waiting in the wings to see if I fail. Anyway, I break up these videos into 4 different segments, which you'll see by the marquees floating down the screen. And without further ado, let's get into it. So I think it was a pretty chill kind of 3 months to start out 2026. I'll talk about this in a little more detail, I assume, in my goals section. But I started out the year starting off a brand new project, which was a sci-fi short story. So during my creative writing time, which mostly happens at my writer's salon, my local writer's salon in DC, I was working on drafting out that story. But then one of the other big events I do at the salon is occasional critique sessions, particularly with the SFF Affinity Group, Science Fiction and Fantasy. We have a lot of members in that group, and I am writing science fiction in this short story, but predominantly for the past several years I've been working on my fantasy novel, A Song of the Wanderers, or A SOW. And last August I finally, after several years, finished up my first draft, and since then I had been toiling away a bit at revising Act 1. And in fact, in my last quarterly wrap-up video, I talked about the struggles I was having in that, a significant subplot of Act 1 didn't feel connected enough to the rest of the story. But now I've taken some chapters from Act 1 and I've been sharing them with the SFF Affinity Group. And they've been really helpful to me, especially the, I guess the March session it was, back in the beginning of the month. And really, I think, expanded my horizons and made me, cotton up to ways that I can increase my main character's agency and also, make sure that I can take more of Act 1 and connect it much more concretely to the rest of the story. So I feel like it's been really helpful to me to, go back into the fantasy novel again a little bit, and I'm feeling a lot more hopeful and optimistic about these revisions to Act 1, and so that's a great feeling as well. But that still is a little bit on the back burner for me, and I'm spending most of my sessions, my write-in sessions, trying to work on my short story. Something else I've been dealing with was actually back in November, because of course these things happen during NaNoWriMo. My main computer that I used for uploading and editing my BookTube and AuthorTube videos really just, died completely on me. It was, it was warning me for a while, but it was very much time to replace it. And luckily, I do have a family friend who was able to, take that on for me, as well as for my parents. We gave him a lot of work for his business. But that meant in the meantime, as he was building up a couple of new computers for us, if I wanted to continue, my videoing on this channel, I would have to take all of my operations to my little netbook, which I got specifically, predominantly to be a computer that I could easily cart around and do my writing on. It was never supposed to, have the bandwidth for significant videoing, but I guess it really did the trick for the last couple of months. It hung in there for me, but there were problems related with it, how I used up all of my cloud storage and then some, and then that started to have some impact, I think, on some of my other programs, including Scrivener. I'm pretty sure this was directly related, that I tried to open Scrivener at one point and I was getting some sort of error message, and then the document I had in hand was not the most recent document, which really freaked me out, because Scrivener is what I use for my fantasy novel. And I've been using it for years, and it has a lot of notes in it and, outline aspects in each chapter. Like, well, I don't feel like I'm as coordinated with Scrivener as I could be, but, whatever I do use for the background material of my novel, it's all easily findable in that document, in my Scrivener document, and now suddenly it was a little bit outdated. Although luckily I do think I have some more recent chapters, thankfully, because I've been working with my SFF affinity group and have had to submit PDFs to them. Hopefully I can rebuild whatever I lost, but it is just a reminder to me how precious all of this is, and definitely a reminder to save and back up as much as possible. And I mean, obviously there were some problems with my computer and backing up there, but another major thing I try to do is after I compile my novel, after working on each chapter, I email it to myself as well. So there's like a lot of ways you could hopefully save your work to have backups. So it's a reminder to me going into the future about how important that is. And I'm debating in a way, like, should I try to move off of Scrivener? Because I feel like I'm way too entrenched in it for this project. It's been really helpful to me. So hopefully I can get everything up and running more normally with that again, now that I actually do officially have a brand new computer for my videoing again, and I've desperately tried to take all remnants off of my netbook of the videoing stuff. Anyway, this section is a little bit of a segue because my primary aim in making these videos is to hold myself to account for my fiction writing goals and making progress with those projects. But a lot of the other writing I do in my day-to-day life has to do with my 3 blogs, where I try to update them at least once a month. So I figured in honor of that, I could, just highlight my top favorite posts of the quarter. So I'm going to start with Jewish DC, which is my blog where I chronicle Jewish events happening in the DC area. And recently, the Capital Jewish Museum got a new special exhibit. It's called Blacklisted, an American Story, and it predominantly deals with that period in the mid-20th century when McCarthyism was really on the rise, and this anti-communist fever really took over the American government, and they really honed in on the creative arts, particularly in Hollywood. And a lot of writers and directors and actors were blacklisted by the studios who were afraid of some sort of like government sanctions. And it was, a big scourge on freedom of speech. And so this was a really thoughtful special exhibit that I got to go to, like looking into the history of this and into First Amendment rights. And, it's one of those things where predominantly the stuff on display is pamphlets and, booklets or papers, people's papers. Of course, since this is Hollywood, we also did get to see some segments of some, blacklisted movies or, created by blacklisted people with some ideas about why they created those movies. And then there were also, maybe even more dynamically, snippets of the congressional trials where they actually forced, blacklisted people to come in and like account for their political sensibilities and that sort of thing. Next, I'll turn to Chava's Footsteps. This is kind of a catch-all blog for me, where I talk about broader Jewish issues, but also pop culture a lot. I am invested in a lot of pop culture, and that was one of the first, actually, I think the first blog post I wrote this year was about pop culture, and in fact, for once, I was trying to watch this old sort of soapy show, The Originals, which was a spin-off of The Vampire Diaries, and my first thought was I was just going to watch it and have fun and not analyze it too much, but of course I can't really do that, even with such a silly soapy show. And I was thinking a lot about the premise, which was it was trying to build a redemption arc for the one of the villains of The Vampire Diaries by giving him a natural-born daughter, which I think in vampire shows, that's not exactly uncommon. It happens. But it made me think about it, especially with True Blood. The idea of vampires as parents, which actually technically has more to do with like the idea of progeny or, the vampires you sire. And I was thinking about, the cultural commentary of that, and the whole shift of vampire stories being about cultural commentary about shifting sexual mores in like the Victorian age. down till now into, you know, maybe commentary on parental roles, because a lot of these sire figures were fathers, after all, having to take an active interest in their natural or vampire kids' lives. So it was actually pretty fun to, you know, talk about those shows. And also I talked a little about Buffy the Vampire Slayer, because I've been on a little bit of a crusade. I was watching some episodes during my furlough from work during the federal government shutdown last year, and thinking a lot about Angel's redemption arc and how it didn't actually include making amends with the person he wronged the most, which was the vampire he sired, Drusilla. So anyway, okay, I was overthinking, but I was having fun. And finally, speaking of overthinking old fandoms, for my reading and writing blog, I focused a bit on Space Cases, which was an old television show that aired on Nickelodeon in the mid-90s for 2 seasons. And really, out of anything, this was the television show that made me into, well, especially a science fiction fan. This show was very much a Star Trek for kids, and it was very innovative, and at that time, I was like in my early to mid-teens, and the internet was burgeoning, and I joined the Space Cases fandom online, where we made websites like on the GeoCities and Angel Fire of the pre-social media days, and fan fiction was also a big part of it, so that's how I related it to my reading and writing blog. I myself wrote some iffy fan fiction back then, but I also was privy to the writings of other fans, other fan fiction from other fans, which was really good, so that 30 years later I'm still thinking about it, and I wrote a post to sort of honor it and to talk about the sort of writing and fandom lessons I took out of some of these old pieces of fanfic, and it was really fun, except of course it made me feel very old. I guess that just is what it is. Okay, and speaking of holding my feet to the fire, now we are getting to my winter 2026 goals recap. This is where I highlight the 3 goals I set for myself back at the beginning of the year and see if I met them. Okay, starting with goal number 1, it was to pivot into a sci-fi/post-apocalyptic story for an anthology deadline. So I talked about half of this, the fact that I have been working on a sci-fi/kind of post-apocalyptic story during my salon time, and the major reason I felt compelled to take this break from my fantasy novel was because my writer salon actually is in the process of putting together a anthology of our writing. And I was hoping to make the deadline at the end of January, although I knew that it was going to be a stretch for me to be able to do that. And I have not made that deadline. In fact, I am still continuing to work on this story. It is not complete yet. So, alas, I mean, I'm disappointed, but I knew that it would be unlikely that I would have made that deadline anyway, and I'm still really invested in this story, so I'm glad I'm sticking with it. Goal number 2 was get out of Act 1 of Asao, which I've also been talking about with being stuck or quagmired in Act 1. And, you know, I talked about feeling a lot more positive about Act 1, especially after starting to workshop some of my chapters with the SFF Affinity Group. But I'm still embroiled in the revisions of Act 1. I am not out of the woods yet, the literal woods as it is, actually, because a lot of this subplot takes place in what I call the dark forest of this fantasy world, so alas. And then finally, goal number 3 is more social events at the DC Writer Salon, because I've talked about this salon. It's so integral right now to my writing community. Most of what I do is attend weekly writing sessions a couple times a week to, you know, have some time that I can carve out to myself to meet these goals. And then I attend monthly, I'm trying to do it more regularly, these monthly critique sessions at least once a month. But, you know, there are also other social events, and the one I mentioned in my last quarterly wrap-up video was this sort of New Year's retreat at our founder's house, and I did actually go to that, and it was really fun and really meaningful to check in with a bunch of people and meet a bunch of new people and, you know, check in with the founder, who actually I hadn't seen in a while. And we just did some schmoozing with one another, and then we played some writing games that were really fun, and then set some kind of goals for ourselves, which, you know, I guess, you know, it's an attempt for me. All of these are an attempt to get things done, but the community aspect was really also very meaningful to me. And in fact, it was right before this day was right before the big snowstorm hit the East Coast and south of the US. And it was a lucky time to be surrounded by a ridiculous smorgasbord of food so that I could take a lot of leftover bagels and what have you home for the next few days before the snow really started up. And I was able to find, like, as it was getting chillier before the snow started, sit at a fire pit at the founder's house and chat with people. I stayed for a long time, and it was a really moving experience and a reminder that, this community is really multifaceted for me in terms of what it gives me. That being said, even though I ended on that rosy note, the goals overall weren't too rosy. So...
Shame. Shame. Shame.
Admittedly, I'm not thinking as much about, Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon right now. I think the last teaser trailer for season 3 of House of the Dragons dropped before the last quarterly wrap-up video, or maybe not, but one thing that dropped even more recently is the Dune Part 3 movie. And admittedly speaking, I have a ambivalent relationship to the Dune franchise. That's probably being a little generous. In fact, I use my Hava's Footsteps blog to do a lot of, philosophical arguing with Frank Herbert's Ghost about that series. But one thing I think is intriguing about the Dune 3 trailer is that we're actually going to see the war that happened somewhere between Dune, the book, and then Dune Messiah, the second book, where, like, in between it was like, oh, by the way, billions of people are dead. Like, what? And we're actually going to see the fallout from the war in real time, which is meaningful to me, or more meaningful than how Herbert did it, I think. I'm not sure exactly how things are going to map onto, movie 3 is going to map onto the book Dune Messiah, but the director's already taken some liberties with the timeline. So anyway, it's just something actually I was thinking about as I was watching this trailer, because it kind of aligns with my thoughts for the final book of my Asao trilogy about, I'm just thinking about what, making this, huge war, like Continental War, and my trilogy finale, and talking about the cost of the war on the characters, which very much seems to be what this movie's going to be about. But I gotta rein myself back, because I'm not ready to think too deeply about book 3 of Asao when I'm still struggling in Act 1 of the first book. So rein it in, self, rein it in. And in reining myself in, I return now to my spring 2026 goals announcement. I'm going to just keep it to the next 3 months and see what I can do. Some of these goals are definitely going to sound a bit familiar. Goal number 1 is to finish my sci-fi / post-apocalyptic story for reals. So yes, I'm just extending things, and if I couldn't make that one deadline, at least I should be able to have this finished by the end of the spring. I already think I'm at least 2/3, if not more, of the way through. So hopefully, I can definitively wrap it up in the next few months. We shall see. And then goal number 2 is get out of Act 1 of Asao for reals. I'm hoping this is likely possible. I am working on Asao more from the back burner and just, revamping chapter by chapter, mostly to share with the SFF Affinity group once per month. So I don't know, it's a stretch goal, but I'm feeling a lot more confident about not being stuck forever in Act 1 of this revision. And finally, goal number 3 is to attend author/agent Q&As at the DC Writer Salon. So I'm being a little more specific than last time, where I just said any social event. Now I'm kind of curious. We've had a couple of author Q&As and agent Q&As with local people. And in fact, there was just one last week, and I was at a writing session, I think yesterday as I'm filming this, and people were talking about it, like talking about this one author's experience and what they took away from it, as in, people's personal ambitions and why they make the choices they do. So, in fact, it was this post-conversation that was really interesting to me, but it would be nice to have more of that context to actually go to the event. Admittedly, part of the reason I don't go to author-agent events, even though they've been happening for a while, is that I don't know, I feel relatively busy as it is. I'm going to the salon at least twice a week for write-ins. I also am a member of a choral group that has practices, and I work a full-time job. So, you know, sometimes I just want to go home and hopefully read or conk out, perhaps. So I don't know, but maybe just at least one Q&A session per this next quarter. You know, I could make that happen, right? Right? Right. We shall see. And that about covers it for me now. Well, I'll definitely link to my writer's salon down below. It's this wonderful grassroots organization in DC in case you live in this area, or perhaps you'll be able to find similar organizations in your own area. And I'll link to the Dune trailer if you want to see what movie 3 is going to be about. It's coming out in December. And of course, I'll link to my blog posts down below as well, and my playlist of AuthorTube videos for my past content. Expect me back on this channel in the near future as I do my BookTube Prize Octafinals ranking video. By the time this is posted, we should have the official results for what advanced past the Octafinals for this year. Very exciting, and hopefully I'll be into the quarterfinals by then, but it's also exciting because I'll finally have the chance to talk about the 6 books I've been pretty mum on as I've been reading them for the past 2 months, so stay tuned for that. And I hope you all feel good about the first quarter of 2026 and what you've been able to accomplish, and are looking forward to the next 3 quarters of the year, however you're going to map them out. Also, Chag Sameach and Happy Passover to everyone who is celebrating with me this week. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. Keep writing, and I'll see you next time.